Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. Thanks for watching. So happy to have with us Dr. Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt Political Science Professor, talking about the Mueller Report. It's coming out tomorrow. CBS News is going to break into programming and report on the release of a redacted version of this nearly 400-page report. To this point, all we've seen is a 4-page summary. Tomorrow we get the whole thing. And someone wrote, this is without a doubt an end to this process, but not the end.
No, not the end.
And how, as a professor, put this into historical perspective. What is this like, or how weird is this? What we are seeing and what's going to happen tomorrow?
That's a hard question to answer. I think obviously one of the analogies that people have been using throughout this has been Watergate. You know, that went on for a long period of time. The difference, of course, one of the key differences was the tapes. You had an argument over what were absolutely crucial pieces of evidence that could convince people with an open mind in a way that it is unlikely. I think anything could convince most people these days, but it did lead to a collapse, for example, in Nixon's support. There have been, of course, other periods of time with intense investigations. Investigations often happen when one party controls the Congress and the other the White House. And so you had Iran-Contra against Ronald Reagan. You had the Monica Lewinsky situation against Bill Clinton. So this is not, in that sense, it's not terrifically unusual that you get this type of effort. This president, of course, I think sort of courted it a little bit in the way he campaigned, in some ways the sort of exaggerated and outlandish things sometimes he even said, that I think it sort of encouraged and brought in or tempted the Democrats to investigate him, his reluctance to release his tax returns, all the sorts of things that he's done. And so I guess I see it as in a pattern in American history. With everything with Donald Trump, it is still different, though. There's something different here that seems more intense, and the idea that the Attorney General could not even calm the waters with a 4-page report. People really want to see the whole thing. I think does show level of trust has disappeared in Washington for even cabinet members like that. Mm-hmm. So.
And I'm interested. All right. So you say there's similarities with Watergate. Mm-hmm. So my question to you would be, let's say, let's reverse things. Let's say Nixon were around right now today, and that same set of things was going on, but it's with the current mindset, the current divided party system, the current feelings people have about just all institutions. Mm-hmm. Would Nixon have survived? Or are you saying that the evidence was so big and convincing that he wouldn't have survived? Or did he go down back then because it was a different time?
Well, some of those things are true. It was a different time. There was a much greater premium on bipartisanship. The Democrats had been in control so long, but they had worked out relationships. There were people like Howard Baker who could be looked at as someone who would look at the evidence honestly. Nixon also provided them with the, as he once put it, the knife that they could stick into him too by taping his conversations. That provided a type. I don't know if you remember that there was this brief flurry back early on in the investigation of whether there were tapes of Trump, whether Trump said something about that at one point, had everyone wondering, was he taping the Oval Office? That sort of thing, I think, would have had a real impact. But I do think had Nixon had sort of the polarized media environment of today, as opposed to the less polarized and more, I don't want to call it objective necessarily, but certainly a more bipartisan environment, and a media that really did see itself as something of an arbiter of issues. I think he might have, in this environment, might have had a more likely chance to survive than certainly the environment of that time.
There might have been a station that would have supported him no matter what.
No matter what, absolutely.
And just maybe he would have survived.
And maybe he would have refused to turn over the tapes when the Supreme Court told him to, or something like that, or at least made it even more difficult by contending again national security, and he would have had some support, decent scale of support. So it is different, and that's why I do think this report or whatever won't change minds because of the scale of polarization in the country now.
And so now that we've gone down this road, can we go back? And where does this road take us? Look where we've come from Nixon to now. Yeah. Where are we going to be from 20, 30 years from now?
Yeah, well, I do think, I think polarization, though, has gone on in American history at different times. Obviously, we have had more polarized periods. I do think, even though it was not necessarily along political party lines, the Vietnam era was far more polarized, and the degree to which that seeped into the society, created violence and other. So we have had more polarized situations. This particular political polarization, I think, could be scaled back with, there are issues and concerns that could be addressed that would take some of the more polarizing issues off the table. But I have more faith that we have overcome worse situations in the past. That's not to say that it could get worse.
And I think it's valuable for us to all hear that we have been polarized before, that this is different, what we're seeing, right. But the country's overcome some tough times before, yeah. And so that's good.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and I do think, and over more serious, even over more serious issues, in the sense that, war and peace, things like that. I mean, we don't have a shooting war going on now, in the sense that, or conscription, or this sort of thing that Franklin Roosevelt faced, say, in 1939 and 40, over whether to intervene in Europe or the Vietnam era or the rest. So that does take some of the. It makes me think sometimes politics is about less serious issues these days.
Oh, that's interesting too, because it seems like it's life and death, but there's no war.
There's no war, and even the Russia thing, when you think about it, Trump has not made any dramatic changes toward Russia that might have actually occurred. Maybe because of the pushback, and he's been sort of very reluctant to move in that direction. So even the degree to which Russia may have been trying to interfere with our system to gain advantages has certainly not worked out for them.
People are concerned that many of our institutions are being attacked and undermined. What do you think about that? Whether it be the FBI, the media, the courts, and then others say, again, drain the swamp, that we need some major changes on lots of different levels, and where we were headed was untenable. What do you think about that?
I think we had a forum the other night at the World Affairs Council here in Nashville, and one of the ambassadors who spoke at the forum talked about Trump's foreign policy as being one of disruption, changing patterns, and in a way this is also what's going on domestically. He is challenging a whole set of things, and I think there's been pushback, and some good, some less good on that ground. I think we will survive Donald Trump. He will, in some ways, some of the fears people had back in 2016 on November 8th have not been realized. We have not had a serious foreign crisis. The economy is still strong. Those things. So the institutions have been challenged, and certainly there have been some damage in ways. But I think there's a certain resiliency to American institutions as well, and I'm more confident than I was a couple of years ago.
All right, that's good. See, that's all good. What we're about to see in this next presidential election is going to be very interesting. Yeah. And we have a bunch of Democrats that are running. I read this morning in the New York Times that people feel like there's some Democrats who, I guess they're Democrat insiders or whatever, are worried this opens the door for Bernie Sanders. When you have this many people running, what does it mean?
It certainly means that many people on the Democratic side think Trump is eminently beatable, and that there is plenty of money out there people willing to part with their money to support their campaigns. I mean, the fundraising of some of the top Democratic candidates has been amazing. Even people who were formerly sort of obscure, like Pete Buttigieg, of South Bend, the mayor of South Bend. I mean, suddenly raises $8–9 million. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary stuff. So obviously there's a lot of Democrats who really desperately want to beat Donald Trump. They're searching for someone. Joe Biden, who sort of the consensus candidate, doesn't excite a lot of people, even if he is seen as a sort of moderate person. So there's a lot of possibilities, and Bernie Sanders has an extraordinary network from his run last time. And has been able to, and you know, last night appeared on Fox, was on Fox maybe the night before, did a very impressive job. So he's certainly a strong candidate this time. I do think it means there is a danger for the Democrats that they're going to take themselves further out of the mainstream by many of the promises that they feel they have to make. But on the other hand, there is extraordinary enthusiasm, and that we saw how enthusiasm affected the Republicans in 2016. It got them out to vote, and they voted for Donald Trump. So perhaps that's what the Democrats are hoping to replicate here, a candidate who inspires that enthusiasm, and that leads to higher turnouts of the sort that allow them to beat Trump.
The Republicans last time had a bunch of candidates, really well-known candidates,
yes.
And then Donald Trump came out of that. We're going to see the same kind of thing this time on the Democratic side, in the sense of a lot of candidates. There'll be debates. I don't even know how you do a debate with that many candidates.
I don't either.
You know, how do you even do that? And I remember those Republican debates, they were kind of odd, you know, and people didn't get a lot of time to talk.
Right.
And
well, they split them up too. They had the adult table and the kids table. Yeah. They did it by polling. The Democrats say they don't want to do that, but it does get unmanageable when you have as many candidates. If you just do it by alphabetic order or something like that, it gets crazy.
It's always talked about either party. We need unity. We need people behind our guy by the time of the convention.
Right.
Do you think Democrats will be able to come together, pick one person by the time of their convention?
I would think that it's a better than 50% chance that is what will happen. That basically, once there's some sorting out early on in Iowa and New Hampshire, and you begin to see someone gaining momentum, H.W. Bush used to call it the big mo, but if you get the big mo early on and that translates into it, the only thing that does, if I were a Democrat insider, I would be a little worried by the idea that because of the way they've done the delegate selections, that it will still be hard for someone to get a full majority right away. You might get candidates sort of collapsing and basically giving their delegates to the front runner or something like that. But it is conceivable that because of so many candidates, so many primaries, that you could have a fairly diverse thing. And you don't have the super delegates who, for example, last time really could crown Hillary over Bernie because they were party insiders, they were the party members, and that could create a problem for the Democrats at the end. I mean, the possibility, you know, Donald Trump proved that the very staid Republicans could be taken over by an outsider. I think the Democrats could also face a sort of challenge in terms of how things
taken over by an outsider. Would that be Bernie Sanders? Is he? He's an independent, right?
I mean, he's not even a Democrat when you get down to it. I mean, but his ideas. Right. have had much greater influence than anything Biden has talked about. So the sense that he is authentic and that this is a guy who's been very consistent throughout his career and has been saying these things certainly is there. Now, on the other side, he is 77 years old or so. He is going to be one of the oldest figures ever to be elected president. And that if he stumbles, even, you know, has an episode like Hillary had during the 2016 campaign, I think that could have a sudden impact too. Any sort of health thing that might suddenly slow it down. But he does have a certain advantage, I think, from both his ideas, his consistency, and the sense that he could be the sort of Democrats' answer to Trump as a populist.
So, all right, we have to take a break.
Okay.
And so the questions are out there. Will the Mueller report, which will be released tomorrow, change your mind or anyone's mind about the president? What do you think about the report being released tomorrow? Happy, upset, skeptical? And let's throw in there now, it's tough to beat an incumbent president. What do you think the chances are that Trump will be reelected as we sit here right now? So we throw all that out there. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break, be back right after this.